Hello, good afternoon. Glad you could join me on this broadcast. It's just me. I'm here in service to you. I am deep in service. I am deep in debt to you, the audience member. No, not really so much, I wouldn't say. I don't know. That I feel indebted to the audience? Don't ask me that question. Please don't ask me that. It's a trying time. Do I feel indebted to the people to whom I speak? That's food for thought. Just give it your all of food for thought. Give it your best food for thought. Give your food for thought abundantly. Did you guys release your inhibitions, feel the rain on your skin yet today? Because if not, there's probably still time. Unless this is like before midnight. You like to listen to my podcast at 11:59 p.m. with a couple of shots of Jack Daniels. That's what you like. If that's what you like to do, I mean, I'm not gonna okay, I guess that's something that someone did. I like to take a couple shots and listen to that. That's beyond me. I don't have an answer for what way. I don't even listen to anybody else's podcast. That's something I admit. I don't really listen to any podcasts. You guys, somebody should send me a podcast. You can just text me if you have my number. Just tell me a podcast. Just send me a text. Or anything like that. Maybe I'm going to upload all of these to YouTube, and then you can write in the comments whenever this episode ends up on YouTube. I don't know how many weeks away that would be, because I haven't put any of them up yet. But that's just because I'm lazy. Lazy is more of a lifestyle. It's important for me to talk about current events, as it is important for everybody. You guys want to remember when Lost was on and everyone was like, "Do you see Lost last night?" And then it was like when 24 was on, everyone was like, "Did you watch 24 yesterday?" Those were some cool times, I'd say. The 2000s for TV. Lots of CSI. Lots of CSI Miami, but CSI regular with no colon in the title. And CSI, Seattle? Did they do CSI Lincoln, Nebraska? CSI Plainfield, Oregon. CSI, the middle of a lake. Any lake. CSI, the middle of a lake. CSI Miami, CSI Science Team, CSI Physiology Report. There's CSI Colorado State, CSI BYU. That was a really good one. All of them aired on CBS, all of them network television. If you remember anything about 2000s TV, which if you don't, then you're probably better off. 2000s, where people actually still relied on ABC, CBS, NBC, and Fox for most of their TV watching. That was a different time. It's a good thing that we don't have to do that anymore. There's like CSI Alcoholics Anonymous and CSI Special Victims Uniform. And wasn't it? There's a lot of CSI shows. There's just a lot of crime shows, because I guess everybody couldn't get enough of crime in their lives. Well, there's just lots of crime. You know, all those shows where a woman killed their husband, Snapped, and any one of those shows, anything on Forensic Files, all that murder stuff of real life homicide. And then all the crime shows that people watched in the decade 2000 to 2010 involving the same thing, like petty homicidal murders or like tragic ones. Or, just crimes, disappearances. So many shows about disappearance and crime, because that's what the news was about, 2000 to 2010. Not that it's not about that now, it's always been about that, but it's just reflective of how much the local news permeated society and decided what their fears were. Like, that's still the thing now. Like, people still watch plenty of those shows. I'd say it's most of the people that watch the shows, though, are people who believe more so in the local news, or just are from a generation where they would believe the local news. Not that you have to be old or young to believe it, but it would be mostly older people that would depend somewhat on the local news. But they're the ones that fed all the content, like the popularity for crime shows and disappearance shows and snapped shows, real life murder stuff. There's just that nonstop. There's so much programming for that. But like, probably people in their 40s and 50s consume a lot of that stuff because that's what they like. Like, that's the kind of fear that they like to get into or whatever. But like, that's just what the world's reflected to them that they should be afraid of, and like, that's how it goes. That's why that stuff is so popular and producers make more of it. It's kind of artistic, like it feeds into whatever your view of art is at a given point in time, where your opinion on art is going to be reflective of yourself, but like that would speak to what America's opinion of art is at that given point in time, because all the shows that are made artistically for entertainment purposes, but they're made artistically, like they're made to be popular or something. Like they are, like TV shows are art generally, or film, and they're meant to say something about society that reflects society. And so the country's art was those narrations. The country's art was those narrations at that time, like 2000 to 2015 especially, just whatever decade or period of time you'd associate the strongest with crime shows and vanishing shows and stuff like that. That's just reflective of the art of the time. That's their artistic view, is they find value and meaning in a disappearance. Would an old, like a generation above mine, generally speaking, or just people who consume lots of local news and do it just to hear about the homicides and that kind of thing. I mean, that's part of why you listen to it. You want to hear these mysterious things, but you would say that it's more you're looking for some sort of enjoyment out of it when you also factor in how widespread the crime show and vanishing show channels are, like how widespread that programming is, that it appeals to an older generation, but a generation that's more likely to consume local news, where it's local news just composed of all the worst horrific things possible. So I guess you'd say that there's something to say about how art is associated with horror in that sense, or maybe that generation likes horror more or something like that, or they can't but if they like horror more, then that's just what they would find artistically valuable. I feel like younger generations almost find embarrassment more artistically valuable. Like that's more reflective of the art of this time period, or like closer to, it's sort of closer to embarrassment than it used to be, but it's closer to embarrassment than horror, I would say. I don't know what, like, embarrassment, that people are interested in embarrassment. Like, that's probably what I want to talk about, embarrassment. I guess, like, what am I saying? I think that my generation and younger is interested in embarrassment over horror, but, like, that would be more reflective of their art, or what they would fix on in a horrific fashion. That's what they think is horrible. But it's like that would take the place of whatever the generation above mine thought was horrible, and, like, crime and murder, because an older generation likes crime and murder because it emphasizes randomness, and they can't accept randomness. Like they don't, because I'd say that they're relatively more religious about things, superstitious about things, is a generation above mine. generally speaking, and so they don't really see how randomness, like they look for patterns in everything, maybe is something like it, or they live by patterns. They're more traditional. The generation above mine is more traditional and more, they're more loyal to a party. They're like more loyal to a Democrat or Republican party. They're more loyal to their identities. They're more stuck in their ways. But like as they are older, but they are older at this point. Like even if you just say all old people are stuck in their ways, then that does apply to the generation above mine because they are old. So they're stuck in their ways. They're more committed to their identities. But I feel like that's just an attribute of the generation above mine. They're just more they're more committed to their identities. They're more loyal. They're going to stay at their jobs longer, or they did when they did work, because loyalty used to be a bigger value back then. Loyalty isn't as much a value anymore. And but I'm just talking about how loyalty is like traditionalism, or if you're being traditional, if you're an older person who likes traditions more, it's kind of like speaks to your loyalty. You want to stay consistent with the same thing, or you want to stay consistent with loyalty, the same thing. You want to keep going with the same thing because you're committed to it. You're loyal to your traditions if you have them. And so a generation above mine, I'd say, is more loyal, and like they're more loyal, and so more consistent to what they're sticking with, more consistent with their identities. They would say that you're not allowed to be lots of different things, more so, I don't know, just more committed to who they already are. And so I don't know why that would cause them not like randomness or have a problem with randomness. I don't know. They definitely, they don't believe in randomness just because of scientific reasons, like an older generation. If they're more traditional or more religious, they don't believe in randomness because they think everything has a plan. Like, you don't have to be one religion specifically. It's just that if you are more religious, you kind of think there's a plan to your life. Or just if you believe in God, you think that there's something calling you and that there's some sort of purpose for all of us, if you just believe in God. And but that would cause you to have a problem with randomness if you think that everything has a plan. And so that's why you would feast on randomness as an older generation, because it's like antithetical to your character. But that's like what's horrific for you is murder and death and randomness that happens in the world, like, because you can't accept that, thinking that everything has a plan, or like giving value to all these people, or like seeing yourself as loyal to people more so, or strangers, like putting value in a person enough to just be really shocked by disappearance. Or you just like don't accept that people do that. You don't accept that level of negativity in other people, would also as a result of you being religious. Like, you don't accept that level of negativity. It's harder to wrap your brain around that people are that awful, because you kind of attribute everybody some level of like, well, they are good eternally, they are good anyway, like, but they'll make mistakes, but everybody is good. Like, you kind of, I would say I would interpret Christianity as you should see everybody as good, but they, like, Christians act as if they see everybody as good because they aim to be that when people walk into church, generally speaking. Like, it's a stereotype that, oh, Christians are actually way more judgmental, like they're hypocritical, like they're judgmental when they preach kindness or something. Like, that's a stereotype. But it's not, it's pretty false, because it's actually the case that at Christian churches, they want you there all the time. Like, if you walk in, they do want you to stay. They want their church to get bigger. They want you there. But the thing is, they'll always accept you. They'll always accept you no matter what. But that's a part of them thinking that everybody is good. You don't, like, as a Christian church, you take in anybody because you're like, oh, everybody's good. It's like you're not like, at least once they're in the church, then you can shit on them, probably, once they've been there long enough. But if somebody comes to the door, then like, you let them in. You can walk in. Like, Christianity is that to the rest of the world. The rest of the world can walk right in whenever, and then they are in church. You know, you're part of that group just by showing up. You're part of being a Christian just by showing up, pretty much. So it's open to anybody. So Christians kind of assume anybody to be good. They assume as many people to be good as they would allow in the church. And I'd say, generally speaking, most churches just open their doors to anybody. Like, it's not that they don't turn people away. Only if they're like really, really conservative do they put bad vibes towards the people that walk in, but still anybody can walk in, you know? Like, it's just for anybody. Like, so if you're religious, if you're more religious, you're more inclined to think that everybody is good. You just attribute everybody like good intentions at the end of the day, like they'll mean well. So it's like anybody come in the doors, because you do that as like speaking, especially from Christian churches. Christian churches let everybody in because they think if somebody walks in their doors, it's part of God's plan, that they're there. If they are there, then it's because God chose them. So they think they're just waiting for all the people chosen by God to show up at church. But that can be anybody, because you're giving that responsibility to God. It can be you're saying God chose, so God is central to he's omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent, and he's sovereign and knows everything. So if he brings somebody to your door, then of course that's who should be there, because they showed up according to God. And so God has that power. He sees everybody. And so because of that, you just see anybody coming in as good, because you assume God is doing the right thing. But that can cause you to do that in other areas of your life. Like, you see everybody as good, and so it's really confusing when somebody commits a sin like beyond the threshold of good. Like, they do something so bad that that they aren't being. You can't equate that with you attributing them some kind of goodness. Like, they do something that's absolutely bad, and like murder somebody or kidnap somebody, and then that's just shocking to you that people are like that in real life. But yeah, so like that, it's I'm just saying that if you think everybody is good, you don't allow people to be bad. Like, people are bad, not just people out in the world, but also people in the Christian church. Like, everybody is bad. They have some amount of bad in them, and it's just some people are at the high end of scale of bad, some people are at the high end scale of good. It's not like majority good. I'd say it's half bad, half good. Is probably closer to the thing, because bad qualities just happen. Like, people are angry, people contain bad qualities, and if you don't let yourself have bad qualities, they just frustrate you behind the scenes or something. They just make you angry. Like, people have bad qualities, and so some people are at the high end and then they murder somebody. But I'm just saying it's more difficult to get to the point where you accept that people have absolutely bad qualities if you do think most people are good already. But it's hard for you to accept randomness because randomness is just, there is no God if it's true that people are dying randomly. And that's what it looks like when all these murders are just of regular people, and everybody that dies is like just a loving husband, that a great pillar of the community, that everybody is so shocked that they died, or so shocked as a serial killer. Like, regular people are always the serial killers. And it makes for a lot of horrifying storylines when you're already confused by randomness, because that would be like out of bounds of what you think is even possible. Is why it would be why it would be so interesting to consume that kind of content. But I guess that's kind of what ends up being popular, is stuff that is outside of the bounds of what you think is possible. But like that you make a popular work of art, like a popular TV show or something, it's something that people didn't realize was possible beforehand. It's some innovation on what used to exist that is innovative in a way that people like, that, or maybe it's just really innovative, and then therefore it's just like a blast of energy from somewhere else that you hadn't thought of before. But like, if you make a new movie that's just sort of an accumulation of previous movies that the director was using as points of reference to bring together to make the new movie, like any movie that's made is just composite of characteristics of other movies generally, because whatever director made that movie grew up watching a certain set of movies that influenced him. He has to know what a movie is. And so whatever movies the directors grew up watching, like whatever the set of them is going to strongly influence their opinion on what a movie is supposed to be, besides just what their characteristics are, but as people. So like if you make a work of art, you're trying to make something that's popular, but it kind of depends on your motivation. I think ultimately you kind of want to make something that's popular. It's just that there's a lot of people that would rather you would rather make something really of strong artistic value, but a lot of times those things rise to the top or are what's standing when you look back 30 years later is like the thing you still remember. Like the stuff that has the strongest artistic value is already the stuff that's most remembered anyway, like is more popular long term. Like, so would you call that, would you call its longevity to be the same as its popularity? I'm just really interested in popularity. Like, would you call something's longevity the same as its popularity? Longevity, popularity. Well, popularity can just refer to any period of time, but longevity is always a long period of time. So it's like, it's not the same thing. Like popularity kind of encompasses longevity, I feel like, because you'd still say something that lasted 40 years was really popular, wouldn't you? Wouldn't you say Pink Floyd was really popular, even though they weren't the most popular at the time? Or were they the most popular? Were they always the most popular? But if they were always the most popular, if they're the most popular from the beginning, Pink Floyd, but then even 30 years later, people say they're the best band ever, or at least one of the best ever, then like that really showcases their popularity in more than one way. But I feel like they got sort of popular by the 80s, probably. They probably got at least really, but it's just a matter of were they really popular when they were making things. I think that that's true too. It's just that like there's a lot of good music at the time. And so maybe they didn't, a lot of good music at the time, so maybe they didn't stand out quite right away, but like people ended up buying all of their albums eventually. I feel like The Wall was a famous movie, so I think that they were already famous while they were still making albums. But that speaks to your, like it's weird that what's popular to you could be something that's an absolute fear, like it is with the older generation that I'm talking about, that generates a lot of the content that they would watch. Besides, like, they watch sports a ton, sure. Like they watch sports. It's probably more women that watch crime shows. Well, like anybody watches a CSI, like a lot of older people watch CSI. It's more women that would watch like a woman killing their husband show, or any of those shows. It is more women that like women killing their husband shows. Like they're just like, oh, who knew that was a possibility, and they just can't get enough of it. They're like, what if? Like you're trying to take on this main character. Like, oh, I just want to be one with the narration of this story. I just want to put myself in her shoes, see what happens. I just want to feel what she feels, this woman that killed her husband. I guess that's what's going on with the Snapped, because it's probably mostly moms that watch Snapped. They're like, oh, wow, this is the only thing bringing joy to my life is the thought of killing my husband. Like, that's probably their favorite show. There's moms all across the country, like, Snapped is their favorite show, and they're just watching it to think about possibilities, think of a different life or something like that. But that's me. It's not totally that, but yeah, maybe it is totally that. I wonder that they could think of. Like, what is a life totally different from this? I know. A life where I kill my husband. So then that feeds directly into what they find artistic. They're like, oh, that's perfect. Like an absolute change in the way that things are. So that image and that portrait of it would be like interesting to moms, because they would think, I could see how I could totally change my life. Like, oh, that is a actual way out. See that all these regular women that killed their husband. Oh wow, that's amazing that like that kind of evil can exist in women. I wonder what it takes to be like that. Huh, I wonder what I can if I can add any of that to my own life. I mean, they just admire it, and most like they just admire it. It's not like they're gonna actually do it or anything. They're just like, oh, I wonder, but not that they're gonna say that they admire it. They just do admire it, and they're just like to watch it. A lot of moms probably that are married probably just like to watch that, just to see, oh, let's see what that's about, just to see, just to feel that like this real life story of that thing happening. But everybody, male and female, watch a lot of Forensic Files, a lot of Law and Order, a lot of CSI, this crime scene, and disappearance. Just so much disappearance stuff. Like, that's the most horrific thing that they could imagine. But that's what the news catered to. Like, the news catered to that generation, or whatever their audience is that consumes that, which is generally the generation above mine. They cater to that by providing that entertainment. Like, they have to meet the people where they're at. But like, that's something they found out about the populace, is that they really like to consume crime. And like, that's what became popular. But they need to, they're in the business of making money, whoever in Hollywood is producing this stuff, so they aim to make something popular. And I guess just like whatever's popular is stuff that you think is hard to imagine, stuff that before you saw it wasn't imaginable to you. Like, it has to open your mind up in order for it to be interesting to you, and then it has to open up the mind of an entire country in order for it to be like, have high Nielsen ratings, be a popular TV show. But it could be popular for a year, be really popular for a year, and then die away, just the same way as anything. Like, anything has maybe only lasts for a year. Any fad, like spinner rims, or those shoes that have spinner rims in them, or silly bands. But I'm just thinking of fidget spinners, or whatever. Anything that only lasts for a year. Some things just only last for a year. It's the same with a word, like fantabulous, like that lasted for a year, and then we're like, no, nobody say that anymore. But like stuff like that, like a word can last for a single year. The same way, like, your picture of art can last for a single year too, like whatever the generation above mine. But they kept it going for a whole decade. Like, that's how long they wanted to consume crime and disappearance shows. They still want to consume it because it's still central to the narratives of their life, where like as long as they're trying to think of something unimaginable, they have to go to the length of thinking of like what it would be like if their kids were kidnapped or got murdered or something, like, for whatever reason. That's something they're interested in thinking about or watching on TV. So that's kind of but then the art, the creators of it are the artists producing it for people, for art consumers. The people making it are artists, and they reflect the art of the time. It's just that in this period of time, we consume TV shows and films, and rather than paintings and sculptures and that kind of thing. Like, this period is just music, films, and TV. But now it's getting into podcasts and like just stuff on the web, YouTube channels, like different, slightly different mediums of the same thing, because YouTube is like a TV show, like if you have a YouTube channel, but it's slightly different. Just so art as a whole evolves like that, where it used to be film, but now it's evolving into a more internet influenced set of mediums of entertainment, like podcasts, YouTube stuff, just anything you can do on the internet. Like, it's the same with music. The music industry, what's popular for music is artistically is evolving into internet influenced music. Is pretty much all the best music, or like it's starting to become the only new music that you can find is electronic or made on a computer in some way. It's just more that way, or it's hip hop or R&B or something, you know. It's everything is more internet influenced music wise, artistically. It's the same with the mediums of entertainment that we consume that are replacing cable channels and TV, just regular TV. Like we're evolving in that way. Like that's what I'm saying that art as a whole, what you find popular, art as a whole evolves the same way that different generations evolve and different generations bring to light new forms of art, but also new pieces of art within the forms of art. Like my generation consumes different kinds of TV shows, but just like people on YouTube now, and that's what is reflected in art for my generation. So my generation likes to see other people just talking as regular people because that's an answer to all the drama and sensationalism and the content that we had to watch growing up, or that we were subjected to from the generation above us, like content that we wouldn't have liked because it's relatively false in these areas. And so like my generation has evolved to say that we want a different kind of truth rather than what we saw as like false in whatever was consumed by the generation above mine, like the false narratives and agendas in local news or just in the TV shows themselves. But I'm just saying that I'm just trying to explain how art is kind of like popularity. But I'm saying that art is like popularity because whatever the generation above mine found to be popular is what they're saying they found artistic, because that's what's reflected in the art by the creators of it. So the creators of it make it, and they're the artists, and then the people who watch TV forever are the consumers of the art. But the artists now are people who make podcasts or people on YouTube channels, like people who have a podcast, people I don't know, like you would have to consider Joe Rogan an artist because that's like part of the art that we consume. Like podcasts is the art that we consume. We still consume music. Music really hasn't gone anywhere. Music will probably always be popular. Music will always be popular. So there's some forms of entertainment that are always popular, or it seems like they're like music is popular forever since we first evolved, or like any tribe has always had music apparently. They have some form of music, I guess, even if it's just playing drums. Like music is always around, music is always popular, or music is has something to do with popularity probably. Like music has something to do with popularity if it is always popular. It's like a medium that is always there. Because like young people always like it. Young people always like new music. You have to be younger to like new music, I would say. But you'll always have young people. You'll always have new music. Like you'll always have new generations that want to identify themselves certain ways, and like music has always been used by everybody, so it's not owned by any other generation. It's just available for any generation to express themselves within it. Like music is always popular like that, and you can always make music. But is there anything else like that that's always popular? It's like every other medium always changes. Like dance is kind of the same way. Like people going back many years, generations, civilizations have always had dancing, apparently. But dancing isn't as universal. I mean, dancing isn't as popular as music, as listening to music. Listening to music is done a lot more. But I guess I was saying that it's like the genre that was most popular for the older generation to consume was horror, and then it kind of has transitioned into embarrassment or something like that. My generation and younger, just that they like to, just that everybody likes Michael Scott, and Michael Scott routinely embarrasses himself. Like Michael Scott routinely makes an ass of himself is what people like about it, because they like the idea with Michael Scott. People like the idea that from The Office, the main character played by Steve Carell. People like the idea of Steve Carell, of Michael Scott, fucking up, like doing the most embarrassing thing possible, but that's how they wrote the character. They wrote him to do the most embarrassing things in all these situations, like at Diwali, like an Indian celebration, a holiday over in India that they celebrate for Hinduism. Like, he goes there and is disrespectful to the culture, but he proposes to his girlfriend at a Diwali, at a celebration of a holiday for an entirely different culture and country, where everybody that's attending is from the other country. And he proposes to his girlfriend and she says no. And like, that's it's just, a lot of the episodes are like that. He just does the most embarrassing thing possible that you could imagine, but he's just written to do that so that you can feed off of his embarrassment. And like, I think my generation likes that a lot because embarrassment is more a cardinal sin, or it's been, or like, we came to believe that maybe through TV shows or something, like maybe through the entertainment we consumed growing up. Like, we ended up thinking that embarrassment is a big deal, because I feel like my generation is relatively more embarrassed than the generation above mine, but maybe every generation is embarrassed the same. I don't know. Like, but we really like Michael Scott because he does the most unimaginable social actions. Like, he does stuff that you are really, really not supposed to do socially. So it's not so much embarrassment as it is like social awkwardness. That's a cardinal sin, and maybe social awkwardness just wasn't a cardinal sin to the generation above mine, but to my generation, like, awkwardness is evil. It's like, we don't like awkwardness at all. We don't like people who are awkward, or people that cause you to cringe. It's like it's that principle. That's what I'm talking about. Cringing or awkwardness, like, that's the worst thing possible. That's why people make so much about cringe, and why we consume so much cringe content, or why we make so much out of celebrities doing things that make you cringe. Or it's just everybody, like PewDiePie has built most of his empire just on cringe videos, like, or not most of it, but he used to play video games, but he's done lots of those. He does a lot of cringe videos, memes. Like, he does mostly memes. He does meme review videos. But memes are kind of like that we make fun of people that should be embarrassed about things, or just like we like to shit on people for them trying to be something. Like, that reflects some sort of relationship to embarrassment where you want to defeat it, like that we make a meme out of anybody who is sort of out of place or sort of awkward, or like did something funny or memorable. Like, I guess that's why you call it a meme, or that's probably related as a MEM, because it is something that's memorable. Like, it's a fitting term for that, because a meme is something that's memorable enough that you want to make a meme out of it. But in this day and age, anything that becomes memorable pop culture wise for a number of days is something you make a meme out of. So a meme is just kind of like a reflection. It's kind of like headlines for what was popular. It's modern day headlines are memes, just regular headlines that you don't have to read further into. They're just storylines, but storylines that are better than mainstream media storylines or any media outlet storylines, because they're storylines that are just central to pop culture, that are a storyline through it. That is, like, historically what would be remembered is one of the most popular memes or something. That's what people would remember in something. It's just it's a memorable thing to. It was a memorable event if there are a lot of memes made out of it, or you're a memorable person or did something memorable. Like, and you can be memorable for a long time and hence continually generate memes. Like, it's probably a good thing if memes are being made about you. Like, you probably did something right, you know? But you probably did something right, but you also had to sacrifice. You probably had to put yourself in a position where you might look stupid, because memes are about making fun of people's stupidity or awkwardness or mistakes that they made too. Like, you probably did, like, but my generation would be interested in blowing up somebody's mistake and like making and like admiring somebody for it. That's what I'm talking about with a relationship to embarrassment. Is like we in my generation or Generation Z might admire somebody strongly for doing something that's objectively embarrassing, or like we're just interested in that, in somebody who makes a mistake big enough that they're every meme or like a embarrassing gif or something. Like we know that it's embarrassing, but it's kind of like my generation would celebrate embarrassment more too, rather than that they just have a problem with it. It's just more that they acknowledge it more, my generation would, than the generation above mine. Like, but that's reflected in the art, like in memes and people's YouTube channels. Like people often have to like ridicule themselves in their YouTube channels if there's somebody my age. That's like, I'd say that that's true too, because they're not allowed to take themselves seriously. Like Cody Ko and Noel Miller and Drew Gooden and Danny Gonzalez, like those people that just random regular YouTube channel people that have a channel around them commenting on things, because there's a bunch of those out there. All of those people I mentioned are generally my age, but they have to like shit on themselves during all of their videos, which is like something the generation above mine wouldn't think to do or wouldn't find valuable or important to do, because they think it's valuable to stick behind an identity, and not like, they think honor is better than my generation does. My generation is more inclined to shit on everything because that's what we do through memes. Like, but it makes it so that our identities would be more ambiguous than the generation above mine, because we don't stand behind identities as much. We're not as loyal. We're not stuck with the same job for as long. We like to try new things, but the internet has made it like our comprehension of the internet has brought to light lots of different viewpoints, you know, just that my generation is more built on consuming lots of different comedy content on YouTube growing up, or just lots of like YouTube makes it so that you can consume any content from any place in the world. And so like a stronger comprehension of YouTube in a younger generation would cause them to be reflecting their art in lots of different places, rather than that they have specific things that they see their art in. Like popularity for my generation too is more ambiguous. Like it's spread out across all kinds of different vloggers and YouTube channel people or podcasters or different, like any show on Netflix. Like whatever is popular is way more widespread because of the availability of so many different kinds of entertainment for my generation. And so the popularity itself is more ambiguous. You don't know what is popular, whereas with the generation above mine, you would know what was popular because everybody connected through the same cable shows, because they were limited to that medium of entertainment for the most part. Like cable TV shows, everybody watched Cheers and MASH, but we don't do that anymore. So like we don't, in the same way that my generation has less strong an identity, or that they would revere a music in a band or a TV show. Like my generation doesn't revere a TV show as much. They shit on it with a meme because the availability of all forms of entertainment, like of every movie that's ever been made, or listening to every song, has just made it so that to create stuff doesn't make you a big deal. Like we don't revere an artist as much anymore. My generation doesn't, because we see that everybody makes art. You know, our art is so widespread, we don't care about uniting ourselves behind any one of them, because there's so much variance among many different forms of art. So we don't unite ourselves behind an identity, really. But it's kind of like you have to show that. I feel like it's more important for you to show that you look embarrassed if you're in my generation, or you have to really not take yourself seriously in order to be popular to people in my generation, is kind of the thing, because it would be more understood that nobody is above, like, yeah, I don't know. I don't want to appeal only to people that are my age, but it's kind of like more people that are my age don't see other people as above other people. We just think all the art is the same, or all like we understand differences in people more so, I would say. But the same way that I sometimes show I'm a conservative, I sometimes show that I'm more in support of like my age or younger generation. Like, but that's just what my identity is. I would like there's some things I guess you can't escape from. Like I think I'm a conservative, and I think but I don't know, maybe I could be a liberal one day. People can change. You can change from conservative to liberal, though. That's the thing. It's not like you're always a conservative. Like, yeah, it's not like you're always a conservative. But the liberals aren't doing anything to get me on their side. What is their party anymore? Like, what is the semblance of their party? The Democratic Convention sounds like a total joke to me. It sounds like from what I get, it's very tone deaf, but that's just what the Democratic Party is now, and that's what Joe Biden is now. Joe Biden's a great representation for them because he's the only one as tone deaf as the Democratic Party. And Kamala Harris, that's a really Democratic Party move, I would say. When the Democratic Party is in total control of who's the vice president and the president doesn't have any say, they picked Kamala Harris because that's who they were propping up beforehand anyway. She was already number one on their list from the beginning, the Democratic Party. They always wanted Kamala Harris because she just checks boxes for them. They don't care a lick about her content or her policies. They just like that she's an African American woman, and that's the entire reason for her being the vice president. And so they make it entirely about race and gender in order to pick a vice presidential candidate for Joe Biden, because that's what you have to do when that's the only reason for Kamala Harris being there. But I wonder how bunk the polls are this time around, or if they're real. Who knows? Who knows if Biden or Trump win? But yeah, like my generation is more interested in embarrassment for those reasons. There's this horror movie that I watched that it's one of the best horror movies I've ever seen. It's called Terrifier. And it's a new one. It's like made in 2017, but it's a good movie because I'd say it's a good movie because it combines embarrassment and horror, which is like where you would go in the direction of the horror genre if you wanted to evolve it with the culture, or in my opinion, or at least it's more interesting to make horror movies that involve embarrassment to some degree, because you never think of those two attributes together. Like, you would not want your horror to mix with embarrassment because that would be even more horrific. So it's like if you evolve horror in the direction of embarrassment, like that's kind of a way that it was going anyway, because it is more horrific the more embarrassing it is. It's like that is what it needs to incorporate in order to produce a lot of good art. But this movie Terrifier is about a clown that kills people, but like not a typical lots of colors clown face paint on him. He just has black and white paint, and whatever person that they got to do it just plays the part really well. But his name is Art the Clown, and basically he doesn't just kill people. Like, he'll kill people, but he also kind of embarrasses them by like, it's a slasher movie. He also embarrasses them by mutilating their corpses. So now you know what kind of weird movie, what kind of smut that I watch on TV. But like I like horror movies, but this one it's a popular horror movie. It's like it's not some independent film that I watch. It's like it's popular. You can watch it on Netflix if you like horror movies. But it combines horror and embarrassment because Art the Clown is a real jerk. Like, Art the Clown is a real deviant that you would especially not ever want to meet, because he just has no morals. Like, he's way outside of the bounds. Like the antagonist, the evil character in this movie is just so is outside the bounds of what you think is even imaginable for evil in a person, is why Terrifier is so good. But it kind of like, in order for you to capture that idea, that you capture the idea of unimaginable evil or like unimaginable occurrences in the world, you have to, and you're doing that as selling it as a horror movie, you have to capture what is horrific to the world at this given point in time. And I'd say that that movie is capturing some amount of embarrassment, because that's like that's something that we're interested in consuming in my generation. We're interested in consuming like the embarrassment of other people, or just propping up people that are embarrassing. Like Kawhi Leonard is the most popular NBA player or something like that because he's so awkward. Like, we celebrate awkwardness, but we used to be subject to it more. We used to be subject to embarrassment. My generation, maybe through the TV shows we watched, like maybe Nickelodeon's in the 90s, 2000s type of TV shows that emphasized some amount of embarrassment, or like at least presented you a really boxed in picture, like a really limited picture of what life is, that didn't allow you to embrace embarrassment or something. Like, maybe my generation used to be subject to it, and now we take part in embarrassing somebody. Like, we take part in embarrassment by embracing somebody who's awkward, like a Kawhi Leonard. Like, we're interested in people that are awkward more so. Like, that's a quality that... But in the same reason why The Office is the most popular show to us, because we embrace Michael Scott as a character mostly. Like, that's the most important part of the show. But he always embarrasses himself in the worst way possible, in a way that you would never want to. He's always in a position you'd never want to find yourself in at work. Like, after you call somebody old in front of everybody and nobody thinks it's funny or something. Like, he does all of those for you so that you can see that and just think it's funny, but see that it's a possible situation, because it's just portrayed to be in a regular office. That's why people can't get enough of Michael Scott, because it's like, it gives them a simulation of real embarrassment, like real social awkwardness like that they never get to experience. Like, is why people like Michael Scott so much. But why people like lots of comedy like that, like It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. All those characters are constantly embarrassing themselves with their narcissism, and they're just like out in public doing crazy things because they thought that they were right about stuff like that. That show is popular because people like to see people be totally wrong and embrace it, or like they like to see characters that have to live through a situation where they are entirely incorrect, but still going about things as if they have the proper motivation. Because like, the people who would more likely say that It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia is their favorite show are people that are more horrified by somebody being like abjectly wrong, is somebody who likes It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia the most. Because they're horrified by they're horrified by being entirely wrong, and they like to see themselves in something like that. But like, both of those are embarrassment. Like, you could describe both of those as embarrassment: the social awkwardness and being entirely wrong in society, like just with your decisions, making decisions that are based on faulty principles, or like having no logic, or sensationalizing things, or being paranoid about things enough that you just run in some entirely wrong direction. Like, some people are horrified by that idea. And I don't know, Parks and Recreation, I don't know what you find horrifying about it, but that's just like a group of people that are really modest. Parks and Recreation, let me see if I can fit that in with this embarrassment narrative that I'm slinging for you. Like, Parks and Recreation is about the modesty of a group of people. Like, they're trying to make it work. They're really kind-hearted. Like, they have all the right motivations. The group of people that works in the Pawnee government, whatever, the Parks and Recreation department. It's just that they have these flaws that, like, the rest of the world would typically see as a flaw. Like, Ron Swanson being a gun nut and... being a libertarian or whatever, and like not liking the government. like other people would see that as a flaw, but they paint him as like really kind-hearted, like he has all the right motivations even though he's a conservative or whatever. And so that's kind of a new picture that people don't always get to see. And like it kind of paints the picture of modesty and kind-heartedness within government that people don't understand, you know, like that people don't ever see in real life. So it kind of presents a world that is foreign to them, just Parks and Recreation, because it's about a department in the government that really cares, but like it also emphasizes the problems in government too, that the department that does care just is hindered by all these regulations. And then when she gets elected to city council, then she gets deposed from city council because she's like the only one that wanted to get the city on track, but that just didn't jive with a government headed in the opposite direction of her, but like a city influenced by the media. Like the city got on her and voted her out, but that's just because of the publicity surrounding her was false. So it's like it's a critique on government and media, but that you would like find genuine people that want to do the right thing in a government department is a foreign idea to people, so they like that. So I guess that one's just kind of different, or at least I don't know how I'd say that that's like Embarrassment. It's probably not. Like there's lots of different art forms that are being reflected today. Lots of different kinds of art. But yeah, it's just like horror and embarrassment. But like Embarrassment is kind of a new take on horror, the same way that horror is like related to comedy a little bit, like the same way that you'd relate horror to comedy. But I'd say that Tim and Eric, if you know who they are, they make a lot of Adult Swim shows. They're kind of more like somebody in my generation would be more interested in their comedy, but most people in my generation know who they are. Like Tim and Eric definitely capitalize off of the bridge between horror and comedy. They have a show called like Tim and Eric's Bedtime Stories, but they're like horror stories that they make funny because their humor is dark. Like dark humor is kind of what I'm talking about, like the link between embarrassment and horror. So I guess I'm kind of saying that dark humor is what would be the new humor, or what humor would most evolve to, seeing as that dark humor kind of speaks to a mix between embarrassment and horror, but a mix between comedy and horror, really. Like, and Tim and Eric make a lot of comedy horror type of stuff, but most of their content is comedy. It's just darker and stranger, like stuff that is too foreign to you for you to accept. So it is kind of horrific in some senses. But like that's a way that comedy is evolving, and I'd say that like Tim and Eric type of comedy is more reflective of memes in its randomness, and yeah, like in its randomness. And Embarrassment itself would speak to a randomness of sorts. It speaks to something that you can't control. Like if you get embarrassed, it was because of something out of your control, you know, because you would have controlled it. You would have made it so that you weren't embarrassed if you could. And so if you got embarrassed, like that was something out of your control, generally speaking, the same way that something that random is out of your control. Something that's random is out of your control. So it's like you can kind of see how a fear of randomness in the older generation has related itself to a fear of randomness in my generation, or like a fear of embarrassment. It's kind of like randomness is a little bit at the heart of embarrassment too, but like a specific kind of randomness is an embarrassment. It's like an embarrassment that people can point out, like you got embarrassed because this happened. Like it's an if you get embarrassed, it's in one activity or in one area, or like, I don't know. I think my generation is interested in being embarrassed, or like they just more of a fascination with it, or they want to celebrate embarrassment is kind of what is the whole thing I'm saying. Like they want to celebrate embarrassment because they don't want to be subject to it, but it's like I feel like freedom, you get freedom from not feeling subject to embarrassment. So maybe it's like the generation above mine is always inherently subject to embarrassment, and it's only at this point that we, as a society, have realized, have been able to define embarrassment to be a certain set of things that we're like approaching it now. Like I feel like my generation acknowledges and approaches embarrassment more than the generation above mine, and so therefore it's like one of the motifs central to my generation that they approach and have to conquer. Like it's like a central villain to us or something, is the ability to celebrate embarrassment, because I feel like a lot of people my age, maybe just my age or younger, they just they aim to celebrate embarrassment in some way so as to say that they are victorious over it. But like but people would only feel that way because embarrassment maybe has been presented to us more. It's just like something we have a greater comprehension of. It's like, I'm just saying my generation comprehends embarrassment better, and so therefore it's more a part of our lives, not so much that it's like the main thing or like the artistic. It's not like the artistic thing. I mean, the same way that it's not like the only art in the older generation was for horror or like crime scene shows. I'm just saying that was just an important part of it, an integral part of it. The same way embarrassment is an integral part of the content that my generation consumes, but it's just because we comprehend it more and more interested in it or something like that. But thanks for listening. And then like I told you before, I'm just going to cut out these podcasts now, and I'm going to put my next thing I got to do is put these episodes on YouTube. I think I'm just going to use the YouTube channel I already have because I have some subscribers on there, and that'll be easier. And I got to just put all those on there and, just not try to do lots of things with it at one time. But yes, thanks for listening.